Yeah, man. I have some friends that are big hockey fans. Obviously, the playoffs are starting, and one of them also said they were a big Avalanche fan, and we were reminiscing on they had some great teams back in the '90s that I would watch. So cool.
The best.
And also, I think the team that's local to where I live, Carolina, what are they even called? Chaos or something like? They're a pretty good team. The Hurricanes.
Carolina Hurricanes. They're good. They're gonna make a deep run this year, I think.
Cause Chaos is that their their thing?
They do have they have something around that, yes. But they're a good team. They're a great team.
Well, I don't know how many live viewers we'll have today. I think Savon's still live. I think they Get With The Programming is going live to talk about they're doing their final quarterfinals, whatever show. That's okay. We have JR Howell coming on 14 minutes from now. He's got a really, really tight window, 30 minutes, like start to finish. We're going to try to get as much as we can in about Crescendo, which is coming up this weekend. So you guys know, we will be streaming that live on the B.Friendly Fitness YouTube channel. We'll talk about the whole competition, but basically we're going to stream the elite co-ed division, 2 workouts per day. So he'll be joining us at 1:30 Eastern to talk about that competition that's coming up. We're going to be getting back on the road after having kind of our down period for the last couple months, where we were very little travel and mostly online competitions. In the nature of online competition, there has been some conversation about a topic this past 2 days, really, that I think is extremely valid and relevant. And I wanted to address it. It has to do with the European regional. I'm actually not sure how to do this. Maybe I go over here. Oh, wow. I think that's it. Let's see if this works. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. So people are talking about Europe, and I just wanted to put a little bit of context. So this is an article that I wrote for Morning Chalk Up back in 2021. It was called "Send More European Women to the Games, Please." And so, I mean, I often mentioned that I've been a big proponent of European CrossFit. Obviously, I go over there to cover a lot of competitions. We'll be at Athens Throwdown before the French Throwdown. Back in Finland, Belgrade Games in Serbia, back to Italy later in December. So we'll be over there a bunch this year. But basically, I just wanted to give some context. We don't need to go through this in too much detail, but I did this study here. When we get to this kind of just a brief graph that really shows, or chart that really shows something that actually Chase Ingram and Lucy Campbell were having a conversation about in the comment section of a Talking Elite Fitness post yesterday. He went on their Death by show, which one of the questions was about should there be a second semifinal in Europe, and they were going back and forth about the context of how do you evaluate talent there. And they were extrapolating to the games, which is what we're going to do today. But I just wanted to kind of see this here, that this has been a topic I've been investigating and researching for a while. That same year, I wrote a different article that's very much along the lines of what a guy, Cameron Gray, who we're look at his stuff in a second, put up on Instagram, again, either yesterday or the day before. But in this study, I basically was looking at the last qualifiers in each continent around the world. There were variable numbers of qualifiers that year for semifinals. This year, there's the same 40 every year. And then I just was doing some of these charts again to look at how well each of the athletes would do in their respective regions. So we see that the last person in for Europe there would have been, well within the qualifying spot for North America, if they had gotten 120 spots and whatever. These are just some examples of different studies that I did, and we'll eventually see that the last woman in with North America down there, the bottom right in the red, the 75, she wouldn't have made it in Europe because they only got 60 spots that year. So those things are just some examples of studies that I did, 3-4 years ago. And those studies were looking backwards at upwards of 5 years of competition data in order to write those articles for the Morning Chalk Up. This is what I was referring to that Cameron Gray put up yesterday, and this has generated a lot of conversations. A lot of people in Europe have been reposting this with a blanket statement. Europe needs 2 semis. Europe needs more qualifiers. And again, this is a study of 4 workouts, 1 weekend of competition, quarterfinals this year. And on paper, you guys can see as clear as he's presented it here, how well that the European athletes did relative to the rest of them. How fit is the last place semifinal qualifying athlete in each region. Europe, their last athlete in was 94th. NA East comes in second, 172, and it tapers down from there. That's for the men. And on the women's side, relatively similar. The East and West, or the East especially, women are closer to Europe here than they were for the men. But same idea, where you have all of the qualifying athletes to Europe on the men's and women's side are inside the top 100 worldwide, or 91st and 94th being the cutoff there. So keeping those things in mind, I think that it is worth acknowledging that, first of all, that's an online competition, and online competitions have some value. Clearly, we need them as qualifying stages to get to the semis, and then you can go to the games from there. But there's limitations with online qualifications, and there have been criticisms of them over the years. I think that what the Get With The Programming guys are doing right now has some value in terms of talking about the athletes that are actually participating in the season. And you have to consider that. I think it's one of the potential pitfalls of the current strength of field system, or worldwide ranking and distribution system that CrossFit has. And therefore, the study that Get With The Programming has been doing through the Open and the quarterfinals has a lot of value in terms of isolating the athletes who are actually competing in the individual season this year, because that's who we should be comparing them against. However, if you do that, then you're only looking at 7 or 8 scored events, all of which are done online, none of them in a live competition setting, which is ultimately what the athletes are preparing for at semifinals in the games. And so in that context, I think that we do, and this is something that I've done going way back. Where is that one, Chad? It's over here also.
Which?
Yeah, the one from this day. I found it. Okay. And this is something that I've basically suggested when I found out the worldwide ranking systems were coming along, is that if you are not considering what the athletes who actually qualified to the CrossFit Games were able to do there, then you're missing a piece of the puzzle. And so in this case, I took a look at the CrossFit Games from last year. And here are the qualifying athletes from Europe, North America East, and North America West on the women's side. The blue are the podium finishers. We see 1, 1, and 1. Or in this case, we're talking about Europe compared to North America. So it's really 1 for Europe and 2 for North America. We look at the green, which is the top 10 for the women. And we see that 8 of the top 10 women were from North America. And then you had Laura Horvath and Gabby McGowa. 13 of the top 20 women from North America. 6 are from Europe. North America women had 1 person in the bottom 10, while Europe had 4 out of 11. But this was Lucy McGonigal's point, is that if you look at that in isolation, then you're negating or being negligent of the fact that North America had twice as many opportunities for their athletes to do well there. So if we just kind of strip the field down to just 10 athletes, then you're going to see what it looks like. So we basically drop off 1 qualifier from Europe and take the top 5 qualifiers from each of North America. Then we still have 7 in the top 10 for North America, 2 for Europe, 8 in the top 20 for North America out of 10, and 6 for Europe, with the other 4 being in the bottom 10. And so this is just the case study there. And then the last thing that I did for the women was I ranked each of the women based on their finish at the games in their region, and then I just compared them across the board to each other. So the top finisher from Europe, North America East, North America West, green means they were the highest finisher amongst those 3. Yellow was the middle, red was the bottom. Laura and Gabby as the top 2 qualifiers in Europe end up having the best finish relative to the top 2 qualifiers from East and West. But from there on down, you can see how it skews heavily towards the North American athletes, with 7 of the next 8 or 8 of the next 9 athletes having the relatively worst performance in Europe. And so when you're talking about the total, potential for what these athletes can do, and you're only looking at the online qualifier of the quarterfinals, it can tell one story, but I think it's only part of the story, and that we have to look at some of these things as well from last year's games season. Ultimately, we're trying to get these athletes to the CrossFit Games, and we want to see the best athletes there. Most people do, and so we're having these conversations in the interest of exploring what does that mean and how can we best do it. On the men's side, it's relatively similar. The North American men sweep the podium. Obviously, there are athletes. The thing is that we have to consider the athletes where they are competing. So Katrin was counted as North America because she was competing in North America last year. Same with Roman. That'll be the case for Tia Toomey this year. And that's just how it is. We know that they're not born in those places, but that's where they're living, competing. And so that's where they count. And in that case, North America sweeps the podium. On the men's side, they get 6 of the top 10 to Europe's 3. You also had Jay Crouch in there out of Oceania, but this is just a study of Europe versus North America. Again, 13 of the top 20 men were from North America, 5 were from Europe. And when you strip it down to only 10 from each, again, we would cut off one from Europe and 5 and 6, I think, or 4 and 7 respectively from North America. Then we are still left with 5 North American in the top 10, 3 Europeans, 7 North America in the top 25 Europeans, 2 North America in the bottom 10 to 1 European. So Europe does kind of take that. They had one less bad finish at the games. And then when you go to the study of each athlete's position relative to their region, you can see that there's a lot of high performances out of North America East, a lot of kind of second place finishes out of North America West, and that relatively speaking, not to say that they're bad finishes, but they were worse than their counterparts from those regions in Europe, with 6 of those first 7 being relatively lower finishes compared to the equivalent qualifier or finisher, I should say, at the CrossFit Games from the other regions. That was like 12 minutes straight of talking, Chad.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's that. I just think, I know you, Chad, that's probably not a topic of super passion or interest for you necessarily, but I saw a lot of people making posts about this, making comments about it, athletes, training camps. There was this podcast in Europe called like Europe is Coming. I was a guest on one of the first episodes that came out about it, and I do think that it's a relevant topic of conversation. We could extrapolate to all of the other regions, and we can. Chase did make a statement in that same episode of Death By for Talking Elite Fitness that some of the what I refer to as minor continents, they are not. That just means they get a relatively less number of guaranteed spots to the games, where the big 3 that we just were referencing get 5 each. Those ones get 3, 2, or 1 each. That was just a label that I gave them a couple years ago. Took some flack for it, but he said they don't need 40 qualifiers to the semis, and some of these might need more. And it's going to be an ongoing conversation. I don't think there's a perfect system, and I don't think there ever will be. But I do think that the thought behind the worldwide ranking and strength of field system of reevaluating year after year is appropriate. And I also would add that in addition to weighing the actual field of athletes that is competing this season, there is value in looking at how the athletes who had the chance to compete at the CrossFit Games did at the CrossFit Games that year. Even if it's only 1 or 2 athletes, if we can go and look at Africa in certain years where they had 1 qualifier place in the top 10 or 1 qualifier place last, and other years where we have South America, they might have 2 guys in the bottom 5 or 1 guy in the top 10. And, those are relatively different performances. So just thought it'd be good to add a little bit of context there, but not going to spend any more time on that because here he is, J.R. Howell. I didn't know if you'd be at home or on the road with everything you got going on this week. Thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, man. I just got done at the gym. Actually worked out with the noon class, did a few things, ran home because it's really close to school. And then I'll head over to get Lilia from school here shortly. So no, it was good. I need to eat something or else I won't eat until tonight. So
blueberries? For
sure. Probably a pound of blueberries and some meat will go down in the next hour.
Perfect. Normal there. How many pounds of sandbags did you move yesterday?
That would take more than some quick math, but all the bags that you saw were moved at least once. And then I guess I probably had to move half of them again just to be able to get to the other ones. So, yeah, just something you got to do twice a year. You got to mark them freshly so that everyone knows what weight they're setting up as far as the equipment crew goes.
You don't have to do it, but you do it. And it's just a one small example of many of the small details that you pay attention to that make those competitions, so popular, so well run, etc. Is this going to be the 4th Crescendo or the 5th Crescendo?
It is going to be the 6th Crescendo because the first Crescendo was actually at the old gym. So, yeah, so I think this will actually be number 6. And then I always think of Crucible as the first competition of the year, which doesn't make any sense because Crescendo is always earlier in the calendar year. But I think just because when the games ends, then it kind of like in my head starts a new season, you could say. And I always think of like, okay, yeah, it's the games and then it's Crucible and then it's Crescendo. But what's interesting about that is when I try to like program movements and there's some overlap, sometimes I think of it as, okay, I tried this out at Crucible, so I know it'll work for Crescendo. And then with other movements, it's I tried this out at Crescendo, now I know it'll work for the individuals. So it's kind of weird how my brain works, but I do use each of them as almost like testing for the other, which is kind of weird. Like that rope lunge is an example of that. I need to know that it's possible for people to do before I like have individuals try to do something like that with it. So.
Well, this would be the 3rd year that I'm there for Crescendo. 2 years ago, I competed there. Last year, my buddy Nikita came down, so I was helping him out, and then also did some streaming on Instagram. And this year will be the same. Nikita's coming down again, and you know Nikita well, and I'm sure he's not the only one, but I've heard about those rope lunges more than one occasion from him.
Yeah, our good friend Taylor Self posted some great feedback, which I grabbed and reposted on my story yesterday. So that's I don't know if that was a good. I responded to his comment to me, good. That's it.
Which is perfectly in character.
Yeah.
This year there's going to be 7 total divisions there. There's this co-ed, elite, teams of 4 division that we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about. And then you have 6 other divisions competing, advanced, intermediate, and scaled. And those are unisex teams, male and female for each of those 3 divisions. Let's put the co-ed aside to this for a second. With the rest of the divisions that are competing there, what's your kind of what's the goal? What's the thought process behind organizing this competition? Obviously, you have a ton of competitive athletes at your gym in general, but when you're putting on this competition, Crescendo, again, setting aside the co-ed elite, what's kind of the thought process for the remaining 6 divisions?
The primary goal behind Crescendo unequivocally is community focused. So the fact that the co-eds are there, like almost on display for the spectators that enjoy the competitive side of the sport is like a plus. But really, Crescendo is there for the members of the Crash community and then the members of the local surrounding community. So giving the community within, I would say, a 2 or 3 hour radius, a cool opportunity to do a team of 4 competition that they know is going to be consistently team of 4 same sex every year, and an opportunity for them to get as many people from within their gyms as possible, even if it's only the only time they compete all year. Having those 3 divisions, novice, intermediate, advanced, where hopefully everyone feels like they fit in and are still challenged to just kind of get out of their comfort zone and do some stuff with friends.
Well, I can guarantee you they will be challenged. There are challenging workouts. And kind of keeping that in mind, do you have because the co-ed division is totally different, what's happening there compared to the others? Do you have a consistency in terms of programming for everyone else and then doing the co-ed after the fact, or the other way around?
I think backing up to Crucible this past year and I guess doing a thematic approach, which is not something I typically do because I really enjoy programming as a way to express what I think is cool programming or challenging stuff. And deciding to do the retour last year as like this, it's not really my stuff. It's other people's stuff that I'm almost like paying homage to and just kind of tweaking it my own way, but to where people can kind of know where the workouts came from. Thinking of the whole calendar year of competition, I was like, well, if I did that for Crucible, maybe it would be cool to do that for Crescendo and just as a one-off. So I decided to do it for the girls, which is kind of all old benchmark iterations. Posting some teasers and some stuff that, you know, I don't think really gave it away too much, but also I was hearing some rumblings that with 3 weeks out and not having any of the workouts, people were getting pretty anxious. So just kind of letting them know, hey, there's going to be some iteration of Eva and Diane and Annie and stuff like that. So while I think it's really cool, and I'm sure if you ask some of the co-ed competitors, maybe they wish they were doing some of those workouts. Well, of course they do, because they look fun. And with the co-ed division, I don't think of it as much as what can I program that will be fun versus what can I program that will be a good test for a lot of those athletes leading into semifinals. And for some of the teams, they kind of know they're going to be at the games, and maybe this is an opportunity to expose some things that we're not good at before we get to the games, where typically those type movements are only tested.
And what number year will this be where you do have that co-ed division with that kind of thought towards, you know, competitive teams within the game season? I know last year there were teams of that caliber, but prior to that, was it the case, or has it just been these 2 years?
No, yeah, even prior to that, like the first year I think that Grit House qualified, they came. Rhapsody was a team then with Jared Shaw and Christian Shaw, who ended up qualifying too. So yeah, I mean, some of the members of Spindle City were in that first co-ed division that I did. So this is the third or fourth year that I've done the 2-2 co-ed with the intent of getting it to the point that I would say it is now, where people look at it as, okay, we're going to sign up for that division if we have aspirations of competing at a semifinal on a team like this, or if we already are perennial semifinalists and we need a tune-up going into semis.
Yeah, I mean, last year was pretty cool that not only, you know, you talk about the local kind of community, but we had both of the Move Fast Lift Heavy teams travel in for that. And then they were able to compete against a couple of really good teams from Crash, the Grit House, and you had these good competitors. And I know you got some feedback from some of those teams last year that they did actually come away from Crescendo with some lessons learned that they were able to apply to their training as they geared up for semis in the games.
Right. And it's I guess maybe it's a little bit bittersweet sometimes to do all the programming and have them come and think, okay, yeah, like this was good for us to do. And then when the semifinals workouts come out, like last year, they had that one with the static hold with the 200-pound bag, and they had like some synchro muscle up, bar muscle up, which was pretty cool to watch, and ended up working out really well on the floor with thrusters. So sometimes like I'm almost programming as a way to kind of predict what they might face. And then sometimes they don't do anything like that. Sometimes they don't touch the worm at all. Sometimes they do the worm in 4 workouts, you know? So it's a little bit of an up in the air, but at the end of the day, if it's fitness, it's fitness. And as long as I don't try to get too cute with it, I think they'll walk away from it, learning at least something about their team.
Yeah. And I think that is arguably even the more important thing. You know, year after year, we see such a high rate of turnover when it comes to the team competition, whether it's, you know, a completely new team that's created, interchanging of teammates, or maybe a team disbands for a year or two, then they come back together. And in that context, you know, to get to the semifinals, you only have to go to online stages of competition where there's a limit to what you can program, especially from a team perspective. And, you know, I think that you know, it kind of works out this year, especially really well with the timing. It basically middles the quarterfinals and the semifinals for the teams. How do you go about kind of getting some of these teams to come down? We're going to take a look at some of the teams you've already announced, but like how early on do you start hearing from teams, or do you reach out to them yourself? Or if there's a team that wanted to compete here next year, you know, what would that look like for them?
Yeah, it's not there's no qualification process. Similarly to the Masters division for Crucible this past year, I kind of just was hopeful that people would know what they were getting themselves into. And like by announcing that the masters were going to do the same workouts as the individuals, that was already like okay, I need to be a pretty high level masters competitor to inquire. And then that kind of took care of itself. So there wasn't really a need to do a qualifier. Likewise for the teams, I try to make the workouts pretty accessible from years past. So I'm hopeful that either by word of mouth, teams have said, hey, like if you want a pretty legit test that's organized, that's level playing field, that has some movements that we can expect to see at these levels, go to Crash. So I rely on people that have been here before to kind of help me out in that regard. But this year, because we never know when exactly the quarterfinals are going to be, or the open or semifinals, as soon as that schedule was released, I messaged people from Grit House, Mayhem. Sam DeMeester said that they did one of the Crucible team workouts last October, and we're like, hey, this was a pretty fun workout. We're thinking about coming in the spring. Let us know when you know the dates. So I immediately reached out and started telling teams like, hey, I'm putting Crescendo a month before your semifinal. I'd love it if you came. So that way they at least know it's not 2 weeks. That's kind of a quick turnaround. There's time to prep for it. There's time to deload. There's time to ramp back up. Like that's really, really important. More so, I think, for the teams than like coming and winning money. Because on the team side, like you probably don't compete to win a lot of money, but you want to know that it's worth your trip, that the programming is going to be good, and that you're going to get something out of it. Likewise, that you're going to be able to actually compete against good teams. And it was so cool seeing the North America East leaderboard. Spots 2, 3, and 4 were all signed up for Crescendo, and none of them knew that those teams were signed up because I hadn't released teams that were coming. So that was like really, really cool for me and I think 6 total qualifying teams for the semifinals in the Northeast are coming, which is pretty cool.
Is that counting the Grit House?
That is, yeah, that's counting Grit House. So yeah, when I announce them, I'll announce them as a 2023 CrossFit Games team, which is true. And while I see a lot of them on the individual leaderboard, and I hope like Caroline and Kevin, I hope they all like go as far as they can in the individual season, because it was unfortunate what happened with the team. They're still looking forward to coming. And I think that's awesome that they still want to come and do it, even though the team has kind of been dismantled for the rest of this year.
Yeah. And so Chad was just scrolling through the 4 teams that you've announced so far. As you said, Mayhem, Ocean State, and Reignited were 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in the North America East semifinal. Number 1 was the Peak 360 team, and then those 3 teams right there. That's cool. I didn't know that like they didn't realize or know necessarily that those other teams would be there. And obviously for Mayhem, they had to take a trip out there to compete, and Ocean State coming down from Rhode Island or the Northeast. Now that's a pretty big compliment for teams like that to travel down for this.
Yeah, that's huge. And like Christine, competed last year on Dex Hopkins' team, on the other Move Fast Lift Heavy team. So again, it's like it's cool that there have been some pieces of other teams that have jumped on new teams and been like, hey, like we went down last year and didn't really know what to expect, but we need to get down here as a tune-up if we want to see kind of where we stack up in a live competition, because at the end of the day, the only time you're going to get to compete against those teams is when it really matters, before the games. So for a lot of these teams, they'll be seeing the same faces at the end of May, early June.
Well, we're going to, if you don't mind, we're going to take a look at what you've got on tap for these teams. I mean, it's something you're pretty well known for as your programming at this point. As you mentioned, these are all for the girls style workouts. And before we look at the workouts, you announce all the workouts well ahead of time, a couple of weeks at the least ahead of time. And you've always done that, right?
Yeah. I like to give the co-ed teams right at 2 weeks, because I just get it logistically. A lot of them don't live in the same vicinity, and they probably still need to come together for at least a weekend to run through some of this stuff. And you asked us earlier, the co-ed division, I said, is like, it's not really the time for cute and fun and stuff. So their programming is 100% different, and it does not have to do with benchmark girl workouts. That is only for the same sex division. So starting off with event 1, this is kind of a throwback from last year. You'll see some of that footage of Will Carter and some people on the standing bike erg. I had them do the bike erg last year with no seat, and it was run and bike and then worm clean and jerk. So it was a really long kind of grinder style workout. This year, I wanted to start the competition and end the competition with skill limiting workouts. This first one being skill limiting under really no local fatigue. So like they're basically just getting their heart rate up for 4 to 5 minutes, and then they've got to execute a high level handstand walk skill.
Yeah, I think, and all of the teams that are competing in this division, there'll be as many as 10 to 12, I think, will end up showing up. They're all phenomenal athletes, but they're still going to see a big discrepancy. Obviously, if you have some of the best teams in the world coming to compete, and then some local teams that are, they would dominate a local competition, but they wouldn't dominate against CrossFit Games teams. But this is a type of skill that just because you're not an elite games team doesn't mean that you don't have athletes that can do this really well.
No doubt. And the decision I made really late was, I think, the right one. Initially, this workout was written as almost a second relay or like a waterfall style where the females started and then they did the calories. And as soon as they were done with the calories, the guys jumped on the machines and they started. And I just kind of saw where that was going, right? If you've got a pair of females who can't get through the handstand walk course, the men just don't do anything. And that, while I think it's important at the highest level, and while I think is important maybe to end the competition that way, because it really does show whether or not you've got big holes and weak links, event 1 is not the time. So making the decision to just say, hey, let's give the females a 12-minute clock and let's give the males a 12-minute clock. We'll combine their times. If they both crush it, great. If one of them is stuck and they work all the way up to the 12-minute cap, that's fine too. At least the males will get to show what they can do.
So that'll be first event on Friday. Friday is only the co-ed divisions competing. They'll have 2 events. And the second event is I have bad memories of this combination from a couple of years ago when I competed there. I don't know how you would describe this one, but it just looks painful to me.
Yeah, so interval style, there is a lot of teamwork just in the fact that they're all going to be pushing, I guess you could just call like a mini bob type sled, right? It's a flip sled with handles on it, almost like a bobsled, as you can see some of the footage Rick put in from Crucible. It's something fun to do because you need all 4 people to do it fast and do it well. But at the end of the day, the format of this, where it is AMRAP, and while I think AMRAP is not great for in-person competition because it almost punishes you by being fitter and doing more work, something as simple as a sled push, I don't think the wear and tear of the weekend is going to like really affect them. So they've got to do, on a 3-minute clock, 60 synchro wall balls. They can switch out when they want in pairs, but the sled will be at the opposite end of the turf. So they're going to be penalized a little bit with every time they let's say that a team decides to go 30-30. That's going to be huge compared to a team that has to go 15s, because they're going to have to, traverse the turf 50 feet just to tag in and out. So just that's already going to kind of show the really, really, really fit teams that think they can do all 4 rounds, splitting it in half, versus the teams that may strategize, hey, we tested this, and after 2 rounds, we were blown up because we had to try to push the sled as far as we could with only a minute rest. That first pair it's going to get tough. So I think that there's going to be a lot of wiggle room. There's going to be a lot of room for separation. We're going to have the equipment crew reset the sleds at the start position between each interval. That way, everyone kind of starts a new race every time, so that at least each round you'll know, okay, we beat them on that round. Okay, they beat us on round 2. Okay, we need to make up 10 feet somewhere on the next round. So hopefully, and the way I kind of structured the competition, at least on Monday, on Friday and Saturday, is they start the day with a little bit more skill and they finish the day with a little bit more just like nasty grunt work style stuff.
Yep. So they'll be done by about 5 o'clock on Friday. And then even though competition will start very early Saturday morning for everyone else, they'll come back for event 3 late morning around 11:15 a.m. And as you said, another skill, and a skill that you test quite frequently, both at your programming at your gym and in competition, that not everyone always has proficiency or maybe even access to, which is a pegboard.
Yeah, this will be, I think, the third Crescendo in a row that we've used it. And, you know, kind of spoiler alert, anyone that watches this and remembers, but it'll probably be the last time you see the pegboard, at least for a year. I'll probably go away from that because I don't want it to get too redundant and predictable. And while I think it's something that I wish they would trickle down to the semifinal level, because if Rogue can, you know, put up those plexiglass at the games, I think that the rigs, Rogue can do anything. I'm sure they could figure out a way to do it there. It's a skill that's been around since 2015, and it's a skill that, you know, has progressed to like a legless style. And I mean, there's, you know, you've seen competitions like in Egypt do the horizontal version. Like the skill has been around long enough to where I think teams that are going to a semifinal level, teams that are doing seated legless rope climbs in competition, it's just something that there's some good carryover on, and it's something that a lot of them probably already do in their training. So when I put it in a competition like this, I'm hopeful that it's not just something that people can't do. With 4 people, the way that I've programmed it here, there is no minimum work requirement. Last year, there was a minimum work requirement of 1 pegboard climb per round, which was pretty aggressive. This year, they're splitting 10 twice per pair. And to be honest with you, man, this workout to me, and when I tested it, when other people tested it, it could be the nastiest of the weekend just because it's so much grip fatigue. That back half is going to be really hard, and the teams that can go fast, they're going to be proficient enough on the drag rope to where they can really, really get the heart rate up and make the deadlifts and the pegboard really challenging. Other teams, I think the drag rope is going to be harder for them than the pegboard climb.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah, I guess, I mean, it is a lot of drag rope for sure, 300 reps of that. But I just see the pegboards because it's so much harder for me.
Yeah, so people that, you know, aren't watching, both pairs are going to start on a different movement. Pair 1's going to be on 300 drag rope double unders. They can split that as much as they want between the two. One works, one rest, while the other 2 are doing pegboard ascents. They've got 10 as a team. Again, can split it however they want. When both pairs are done, they'll switch. They'll do the other movement. And then when both pairs are done, they'll move to the deadlifts. At that point, they can rotate however they want. If they've got an athlete that wants to do all 30 on the male or female side, or as a pair, they can do that. I'm just going to kind of give them the freedom to get through those 30 as however they think they need to. The weight on that is 365 and 255. And after the drag rope and the pegboard, the consensus was that the weight feels a lot heavier than that. And that's great because I didn't want it to be crazy heavy. But I think just the stimulus of the workout will help it stand as one of the heavy movements of the competition. Once they're done with the deadlifts, they'll go back. The key as you're watching this workout is that it is written as an up and back chipper. So if you start the workout on the drag rope, that's where you will end the workout. And if you start the workout on the pegboard, that's where you will end. So everyone's got to return to the movement they did prior to the deadlift, after the deadlift.
Yeah, that's going to add up for sure. And it'll lead into second event on Saturday, 4th event of the weekend for these guys, which is going to have another kind of I believe it's, maybe it's all 4. No, it's co-ed pairs. So you got some burpee box jump overs and then the worm lunge.
Right. So this one is like the gas pedal workout for sure. The time cap is 10 minutes, but I think the fastest times will be 7 to 8. It'll be laid out on the floor pretty cleanly where they'll do 50-foot chunks on the worm lunge. And if you guys watched last year, we saw the Move Fast Lift Heavy team. And I think Hickory actually figured it out as the workout went on, where you could kind of flip the worm and turn your body to where you didn't have to put it down. That was pretty cool. Teams will be able to do that. And I'm sure there will be teams that do that where they have athlete 1 leading the worm, and then coming back, they'll have that same athlete trailing as the last person just to save some time. They have to switch every 10 burpee box jump overs. That's probably the thing I'm doing in this workout to try to expose if there is someone that just can't really keep up. So you don't really have to put each person on the floor by themselves doing something to know, okay, there's where the team is slowing down. That guy's waiting on the floor for a 1/1000 on the female every time, or vice versa, right? So 10 and 10 on the burpee box jump over, lunge down and back, 3 rounds. Really simple, 30 reps each for each pair. It is a 30-inch and a 24-inch, something I went back and forth on a lot. Do I make them both do 30? Do I let them both do 24? But I think the nature of this workout is going to be right that it's 30 and 24.
And so worm comes out for the first time at the end of day 2, and then we bring it back on Sunday morning. In total, 2 worms over 6 scored events on 3 days of competition, which I think is appropriate for this kind of team competition.
Yeah, there was a while there where the worm was coming up so much that I thought, and even last year, I think 3 out of the 6 I had the worm involved in some way. And then I think maybe it was only used for 1 workout last year at semifinals. And I was like, you know what? There's probably other ways that I can test synchro stuff. I mean, that's kind of a tip of the hat, like Tabaz. I think of the quarterfinals programming with the front squat synchro with the handstand walk, and it exposed so many teams. It almost showed that you can kind of get away with helping someone on the worm, where someone's not really doing their share and you're just letting the other people carry more of the work. But if each person has their own thing, you can't do that. And so it kind of helped me with programming a little bit too. Like, hey, maybe there are ways that I can do synchro stuff and not really have the worm be the end all be all. This workout, obviously I'm coming after the midline on the last day. Both workouts have a lot of midline because there's a lot of gymnastics involved. Ascending rep scheme, which I try to do with every one of my competitions. I think if you're not doing ascending rep scheme workouts, you're really kind of missing out on an opportunity to truly figure out how to pace workouts correctly. In this workout, almost half the reps is in the last round. So they're doing 18, 30, 42 synchro GHDs and toes to bar. Similarly to event 3, pair 1 is working on one movement synchro, pair 2 is working on the other. Then they'll switch and do the other movement. When they're both done, they'll go to the worm and do 30 squats after each round. So the final round will be 42 GHD, 42 toes to bar switch, 42 GHD, 42 toes to bar, and then 30 worm squats. So this is all midline and hip flexors.
Yeah, and so 2 worm workouts, 1 on Saturday afternoon, 1 Sunday morning, and then leads into the final, which is, like you said, kind of a bookend of skills being tested and potentially limiting for some teams. The flip sides will come out in their normal capacity, but a big volume of ring muscle ups here as well.
Yeah, this I'm absolutely a sucker for clean rep schemes and nice like symmetry and stuff like that. The way that the turf is laid out, all that, thinking of how I can get the flip sled on each end and it be clean from a viewership standpoint, but also so the equipment crew can change weights. And, I do have some limitations there that I still have to work around. Ultimately, this is the high skill to end the weekend, but under a lot of interference. So the flip sled is essentially just an odd clean and jerk, and the dumbbell snatch is a lot of midline, but still a lot of shoulder fatigue. So the males get to me, the harder version of interference. So they go from dumbbell snatch to parallel handstand push-up at a full deficit. That's more like 14 inches instead of 12. Then to the flip sled for 18 flips. Then to the rings. So you've got 12 parallel handstand push-ups and 12 ring muscle-ups. If they split it evenly, most teams probably will not be able to do that. I'm letting them kind of choose their own adventure as far as how they split the reps. Again, in the past, I've put someone on an island and just said, hey, you got to do the workout, and then you got to do the workout, and then you got to do the workout. So instead of just having that relay style where it's just an individual workout, I think this will do the exact same thing because the chunks are big enough that if you've got one person doing all 24 handstand push-ups, you're done. Or if you've got one person that's got to do 20 of the 24 ring muscle-ups, like that pair just cannot keep up. So it will still show who has a really well-rounded team and who has 2 teammates, in this case, same-sex pairs, where they can both kind of share the work. And then for the females, because I know that this movement combination is going to get harder for them, they start with the gymnastics and finish on the flip sled, which will also be really fun to watch from a viewership standpoint. there's not really anything easier to watch than, okay, so they're going to flip until they get to that line and that team's going to win.
And there we go. Run through of the 6 workouts that the elite co-ed teams will do. 7 total divisions competing this weekend, and you will be able to watch it. I'll stream all of the co-ed elite heats on B.Friendly Fitness YouTube channel. I'll head out there tomorrow night, actually. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to come over after I pick up Nikita from the airport. So I'll give you a call when we're on the way. But thank you for taking the time, man. I know it's a busy couple of weeks for you. I'm looking forward to seeing the product on display this weekend, and hopefully a bunch of people can tune in and watch as well.
Yeah, it won't be ready until Friday, but it'll be ready Friday.
All right, man. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, dude. See ya.
J.R. Howell, CrossFit Crash Crescendo. I got to run as well, actually, so we're going to cut it off there, but appreciate him taking the time. Chad, thanks for running the back end. And if you guys missed it at the beginning of the show, just did a little so what do you call it? A monologue about European CrossFit. So you can go back and check that out if you missed it. So thanks, guys, for being here. We will actually be back tomorrow with Bella, Martin, and Patrick Clark in the evening to go over some quarterfinal stuff in more depth. But until then, be friendly, our friends, and we'll see you around.